Oh yeah, baby, Chrono Trigger is back. New year, new content for the greatest game ever made. I know a lot of you have been champing at the bit for more content revolving around CT, and trust me, there's no shortage of ideas from my end. So let's kick off 2022 with a character spotlight. Cyrus, the legendary hero of Guardia and the first known wielder of the Masamune. His story is well known by everyone in the kingdom, to the point that people are genuinely surprised that you've never heard of him, going so far as to call you a fool. Par for the course for these NPCs. Check out my other video for an in-depth look at that nonsense. Let's cover his backstory a bit before we get into the meat of this video. One thing that lends so many interesting conversations about Chrono Trigger is that special NPCs like Cyrus get tons of development, and even satisfying resolutions to their character arcs, even when it seems that their part of the story has already been told. Cyrus is a perfect example of this. He is your archetypical knight in shining armor, having undying loyalty to his liege and unyielding bravery in the face of danger. It's also well supported by the game's dialogue that he's a master swordsman, only being surpassed in skill by his best friend Glenn. Patching together all of Frog's flashbacks, we can surmise that he and Cyrus had been friends for a very long time. When Glenn is being picked on in Guardia Forest, Cyrus comes to his rescue, scaring off the bullies. We can glean from this that he was already well known in Guardia, and was likely a squire at this point in time. Cyrus comes off as a sort of older brother to Glenn in a way, teaching him that even if he's hurt, he should stand up for himself and be tough, and calling him a marshmallow, basically saying he's too soft. This persists later on in the story when Cyrus tells Glenn he's going to enlist as a Knight of Guardia. Glenn expresses that he believes Cyrus will be a natural in the knighthood role, to which Cyrus says his famous line denoting Glenn's superior skill with the sword, suggesting he join the army as well. We pick up the narrative sometime after Cyrus succeeded in becoming a knight, and is heading off on a journey to defeat Magus, whose war was driving Guardia to the brink of destruction. Two tasks were involved in this quest. One was to defeat the Frog King, an amphibious creature apparently residing in the forest surrounding the castle, who through unknown means attained the hero medal, the symbol of the true honor and prestige among warriors. Having fought the creatures on his way, besting the Frog King in battle and recovering the medal, he and Glenn make their way to the peak of Denadoro Mountain, where the object of his second task rested. Being the honorable hero he was, and now with the medal to prove it, he ostensibly did battle with Massa and Moon, the physical embodies of a legendary sword said to be able to seal Magus's power, and succeeded in defeating them. Now with the Masamune in hand, Cyrus and Glenn left the cave to start back down the mountain, only to encounter Magus himself, accompanied by his top mystic general, Ozzy. Perhaps it was due to his fatigue from fighting for the sword, or his overconfidence having obtained it, Cyrus is unable to contend with Magus's strength, and the sword is cracked in two. Severely outmatched and running on empty, Cyrus commands Glenn to retreat, to which Ozzy mocks them both. Enraged, Cyrus lunges at Magus one final time, and is struck down by lightning, collapsing at Glenn's feet. He once more tells his old friend to run away, and with his final breath, begs him to protect Queen Leene. Seconds later, his body is engulfed in flames and burns away to nothing, ending his story and setting Glenn on his own crooked path of redemption. So here's the thing about this story. It is very clear what the game intends for you to understand from it at face value. Cyrus was a badass knight, overcame some crazy challenges, and met his end when he finally came face to face with an enemy he clearly underestimated. This was meant to spur on Glenn to eventually take revenge and become a true hero worthy of the Masamune, despite his low self-esteem and guilt at watching his best friend die and then being cursed as a result. But we're not here to talk about Glenn. That is for another video. The more you look at the context of these flashbacks and Cyrus's role in them, the more peculiar they become. Number one, and this is one I'll directly address now, as it's not terribly important. During this scene, he seems to be using a glowing red weapon, similar to the ruby knife that Melchior made. We don't see him use this again at any point in the story. He's also fighting against Naga-Etz, enemies who are repeatedly shown to be minions of Yakra. This could just be a nothing point, and we can assume that Yakra was still at large in Guardia's forest, so his minions were likely running rampant. Yakra didn't disappear until the cathedral was built, after all, and we don't know exactly when that took place. It may be that the Frog King was actually one of these lesser creatures in service to him, or even one who took over after Yakker's disappearance, but who knows. Again, this is just one of many oddities, and the least consequential to Cyrus. Just a point of interest that I couldn't bear excluding. Number 2. Why is Cyrus so protective of the Queen? Obviously he's a knight, and protecting the royal family is his duty, but he clearly places more importance on Lean's safety than King Guardia's, which is a bit strange. Keep this in mind moving forward. Number 3, and perhaps the most interesting. Who is this woman in the scene with the Frog King? She is never referenced, never mentioned, and doesn't even have any lines. A whole lot more on this later, but we'll put a pin in it for now. Number 4, how in the hell did Cyrus beat Massa and Moon? Even for our party of magic-wielding characters, it still took 3 of us to win. Even if we assume Glenn helped, what were they to do when the 2 of them combined and they had to dissipate the whirlwinds to survive? And finally, number 5. What exactly happened in this scene? Again, the game wants you to believe a great battle between Cyrus and Magus is taking place, and the Masamune somehow shatters, but we don't ever see that happen. We only have context clues from Glenn's lines off-screen. Okay, so, now that the stage is set, I can reveal one of my oldest Chrono Trigger theories. I have. I'm talking like second playthrough ever of the game old. Here. I'm not joking. Funnily enough, it was also the first post I ever made on Chrono Compendium, having been a lurker since the site was created, and many people responded, saying it was headcanon to them now. You can still find the original post in the character plot forum if you want to check it out, but I'm going to outline it here with some updates. So despite Cyrus's story and personality being somewhat well fleshed out, we still know next to nothing about his private life, or if he even has a family. I posit that there's a fairly good chance he does, and a pretty important one too. So here it is. My theory on why I think Cyrus is an ancestor of the game's main character, Chrono himself. First, some of the weaker points to this theory, the sprites. So when we see young Cyrus rescuing Glenn, he uses the same sprite that many NPCs use. But why? Why portray him in this way with red hair and a sky blue tunic? I understand this doesn't hold a ton of weight, as saying he's related to Chrono based on choice of clothing is a little bit far-fetched, even for me. He could even be Fritz's ancestor in that case. But let's move on. The sprite on the bridge is the one that lends the most to this theory visually. We only see him from the back, but you can definitely see his most prominent feature. That spiky hair. No one else in the game has hair quite that spiky, except for one very important character, of course. Looking at Cyrus's character art, you even see a bit of facial resemblance with Chrono, although that could be said for almost every male character in Toriyama's art style, but just imagine for a second that his helmet was removed in this picture, and the spikes were allowed to break free. Now, to some more compelling evidence. Back to the woman in the woods. This nondescript lady just hanging out while Cyrus Nirvana strikes the crap out of the Frog King. Who is she, and what is she doing there? It's not unlikely that she was perhaps a captive of the Frog King whom Cyrus and Glenn rescued, but what happens to her after? If you're a woman in Guardia Forest who just saw this hulking armored badass show up, rescue you, sending your captor hopping away in fear with one attack and collecting the medal of true heroic achievement, let's just say you'd be more than impressed, and likely pretty dang, hot and bothered. It's a tale as old as time, man. Damsel in distress, knight in shining armor. You get the picture. So even if this woman was simply a Trieste, I mean, come on, even Cyrus has needs, and he decided to continue his journey from there without her, who's to say that 9 months later, a little spiky-haired mute goofball wouldn't have suddenly appeared? The reason this idea fits so well for me is, well, just the mere inclusion of this character in the flashback at all. They could have just as easily shown Glenn and Cyrus facing down the Frog King alone, and never had this random woman present. But why didn't they? Anyway, on to the battle for the sword on Denadoro. After beating the split forms of Massa and Moon, they tell our party that only Cyrus made it this far, and then they combine. Now remember what I said about the whirlwind. If you recall, there is only one attack that dissipates it, Slash, a move exclusive only to skilled swordsmen like Chrono. It is also a technique that can be used before obtaining magic from Specchio, proving that it only requires training to perform, and nothing supernatural. I posit that Cyrus knew this technique, and was able to beat Massa and Moon's combined form because of it. Now, I'm aware that there are hundreds of ways to poke holes in a lot of this theory, but give me a break, it was my first one ever. One of the arguments you could make is, since Cyrus is such an important character, we likely would have met his family if he had one, right? So that sort of torpedoes the one-night stand idea. But barring that, what if we have met his family? Or at least, his lover? The Queen. Take care of Lean. It sounds crazy, I know, but you absolutely cannot deny how much Cyrus cares about the queen, and vice versa. Look at how she edges off of the throne here when he turns his back to leave, even running after him when he and Glenn are about to exit the castle gates. It puts me in the mind of the story of Guinevere and Lancelot, and the parallels are striking there. Maybe they had something going on, and maybe even the king knew of it. Maybe there was even an illegitimate child in the mix, hidden away in truce, close enough to watch it grow, but far enough away to not cast shade on the noble lineage of Guardia. Hell, even when Glenn meets his old friend in ghost form for the first time since his death, he mentions Lean again. No mention of the king or anyone else, just the queen. There are a few more little things that I think might point to a hidden blood connection between Cyrus and Chrono, but they aren't incredibly supportive. One is how quickly Frog took a liking to Chrono, saying he had potential to be a good swordsman, perhaps seeing a deep resemblance between he and his old friend. Another is Chrono's seemingly fearless bravery, but this is all hearsay. But anyway, that's my big fat Cyrus is Chrono's ancestor theory. Not perfect, but pretty fun. Now, another tiny theory I have that has to do with the battle on Denadoro Mountain. As I said, almost the entire fight takes place off-screen in the game. The Masamune gets split at that time, and during our quest, we find the two halves in very interesting places. The blade is where you might expect it to be, in the cave at the top of the mountain. It's where we find the hilt that intrigues me, though. After bringing the hero medal to Frog, we're able to open the glowing chest near his bed to find the hilt. But why would he have it? Cyrus was wielding the sword, right? And the only thing we saw float down to Frog was the medal. I think during the battle with Magus, it was actually Glenn who was wielding the Masamune. He's even the one who yells out its name as it's shattered in the flashback. It would stand to reason that when it broke, whoever was holding it during the battle would be left with just a hilt in his hand, right? Now again, this can easily be shotgunned by saying maybe Glenn found it after the battle, or grabbed it from Cyrus as he died, but who knows? I think that perhaps Cyrus might have encouraged Glenn to take the sword following the battle with its avatars, once again acknowledging his superior skill, but maybe not. Finally, we can't talk about Cyrus without mentioning Chorus and the Northern Ruins. If you go to the ruins in the present before fixing them in the past, you encounter Cyrus's ghostly spirit, a possessed suit of armor, and he has totally lost it. When the fight ends, he recognizes Glenn, but quickly reverts to his mindless growling. Once you repair the ruins, and after a tearful reunion, Cyrus's spirit is finally put to rest, and the Masamune reaches its true final form. This is a small detail, by the way, but I just want to point out how cool it is that when the Masamune begins flashing, if Magus is on your team, he cloaks himself from its light, showing that it is still a weakness of his. Sorry, it's just little touches like that that make this game so amazing. Many people have taken it for granted that since Cyrus's grave is here and not in Guardia somewhere, it must be his hometown. There is nothing in the script that suggests it, however, and he is only ever mentioned as Chorus's guardian angel by the townsfolk, once you've transformed it into the hero's grave. Anyway, there you have it. Although Cyrus is a sort of cookie-cutter hero-type character, no player in the story of Chrono Trigger is short of being deeply analyzed. At least not by me. For what it's worth, Frog would never have been the fantastic character he is if it weren't for Cyrus. And, if my theory is right, Chrono wouldn't even be here without him. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.